your thoughts on the San Antonio Spurs?
Wow. What a night, Sam, for San Antonio and the San Antonio fans there. They have unbelievable luck at the top of drafts. And this entire time, we've been talking about how Victor Wembanyama is going to change the course of whatever franchise gets the number one overall pick. But equally as important in this is making sure that Victor ends up in a franchise that is stable, secure, has a really good plan for him, is innovative in a lot of different ways because he's a unique prospect. And we were all rooting to see him go to a place that would just let Victor be Victor. And to me, that's the biggest gain that we have just as NBA fans is this is a little bit of a blank slate of a team, if you will. There are a lot of ways that they can build a roster around Victor Wembanyama, but they have a track record of really developing guys to become elite level talents and rewarding those who are loyal, who do things the right way. I think this is an unbelievable situation for Vic to walk into.
I think it's an awesome situation for Vic as well. He gets to go from Vincent Collet, who is the French national team coach that stepped in this year to coach Metropolitans 92, the team that Victor Wembanyama plays for over in France. And he slides from Collet over to Greg Popovich, one of the best coaches in basketball history. It's a really strong developmental situation for Victor Wembanyama, and I couldn't be more excited for him that he's going to get to enter that fray. Now, the roster is interesting, right? I think you and I both really like Jeremy Sochan, and I think Sochan is actually a tremendous compliment to Victor Wembanyama because he's a switchable, smart, high IQ player. He has like a very European style in terms of the way he plays, in addition to being a longer, versatile four-man. I really like that fit. And then Wembanyama's shot creation, I think, will also allow Sochan to be able to come along a little bit more slowly as he completely rebuilds that jumper that has been a little bit broken over the years. The other exciting thing about the San Antonio Spurs is they have two starting caliber wings already that fit the age timeline for Wembanyama. I think that because Devin Vassell only played 38 games last year, people didn't really recognize the leap he took. He averaged 18.5 points, actually seeing increases in both his three-point percentage and his overall field goal percentage last season. He is a solid defender that came into the league as a 3-and-D player, but has really developed his on-ball game. If I remember correctly, you were also, like me, a big fan of Devin Vassell in the 2020 draft, right?
I had him number 3 on my board. I was a really big fan of Vassell.
Yeah, and I think I had him at like 8 or so, and I think they took him at 13, 12, something like 12, that. Yeah. So I think we were higher than consensus on Vassell, and I think Vassell looks like one of the 5 or 6 best players in that draft class right now, especially if we're considering long-term. So the other piece they have is Keldon Johnson. People forget Keldon Johnson is only 23 years old. It feels like he's been around for a long time at this point. He actually averaged 22 points a game last year as well. He took on a big offensive assignment that was probably a little bit above what he's capable of doing, but filled it somewhat admirably. His shooting can be very inconsistent. His decision-making can be a little bit inconsistent from time to time. But overall, he is like definitely a starting caliber wing, and they have him on like a great contract moving forward that I think is like $16 million for the next 3 years, if I remember, maybe 4 years, if I remember correctly. So across the board, the 2 through 5 spots now are set, and Wembanyama's presence does a really nice job of sliding those other guys into roles that fit. Role allocation is really key in the NBA. Devin Vassell is not going to be a number 1 option, in my opinion. He's going to be a number 2 or a number 3, I think, on a great team. He'll average 20 points a game, and he'll be useful defensively, kind of in like a Chris Middleton-y kind of way. You know, he needs to improve a little bit as a shot creator to get to that level. But I think he has that kind of upside to be an all-star like that. You know, Jeremy Sochan makes a lot more sense as your Swiss Army knife flying around and being like a winning player. He gets to do that now. They need to find a point guard. They need to find a few things. But I really think that this is a situation that lines up perfectly for Victor Wembanyama moving forward.
Totally agree with that because they're surrounding him with, look, in 2 or 3 years, this is going to be an unbelievable defensive team. Unbelievable defensive team because Victor provides such unreal rim protection, but he can also play at the level. He can switch some things late clock if you need him to. They've got length around him. They've got really smart players like Sohan and Vassell, Keldon Johnson, who's that strong bully bowling ball. Like they can toy around with some of the on-ball matchups in a playoff series to keep Victor as a helper in similar ways to what we're seeing the Lakers do right now with Anthony Davis. There are so many options that they can go for. I think they'll probably add or look to add another bigger body in presence so that there can be sometimes against different opponents they want to play Victor with another bigger guy at times. They do need to add that long-term point guard spot, but that's an easy one to fill because if you are a guard, how would you not want to play with Victor Wembanyama? Throw the ball up to him in the pick and roll, be able to spot up on the perimeter while he's posting in the mid-post area. Like this is the ideal lob throwing target. I think it's going to be very easy to attract guards to want to come to San Antonio now. It's just how do they find enough floor spacing and shooting and make the timelines sync up so that they're getting the best version of this team to crank open a title window for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, if not more.
I think that's dead on. I think it's worth us. I'm glad you brought up first and foremost the idea of them signing a bigger body. I think that's definitely right because I think that you want to try and avoid as much wear and tear on Wembanyama as possible earlier in his career. Like if they have a game against Joel Embiid that night, or if they have a game against, Yusuf Nurkic or someone like that, that's going to try and just like hit him and like bump him constantly. You don't want that. And I think it would make a lot of sense for them to go out and just sign a bigger body and sometimes play Wembanyama at the 4 and then also sometimes play him at the 5. Like I would imagine that a lot of the time Vic is going to close at the 5. That's always been my vision for him.
Right.
Yep. It's a very similar positional situation to Anthony Davis earlier in his career. Anthony Davis's best position has always been the 5. I think that's where you get the most value out of his offensive game, the best marginal value at the end of the day. But you also don't want him taking these unnecessary hits all the time around the basket as a rebounder, everything that goes with that. So I really think that it makes a lot of sense for them to sometimes play him at the 4, sometimes play him at the 5. The Spurs are really smart organizationally. They're in a really good position. I think that they'll figure it out. The other piece of this that is now interesting is how long do we think Greg Popovich is going to stick around for? Yeah. Right? I'm fascinated. Does this reinvigorate him? Does this make him decide that he wants to stay for 4 or 5 more years? He's someone that very clearly has a lot of interests outside of basketball. He's a very cultured, like intelligent human being. Does he want to do this forever? I don't know. I think that piece of it is really intriguing as well. And where they go in terms of hiring a future coach is also really intriguing, given how widespread the Popovich tree is.
Yeah, and that last point is really important. I think there will be coaches who, whenever that decision is made, are lining up to come to San Antonio and be able to work with Victor Wembanyama in this core, provided the Spurs can keep everybody around, prove that it's successful, he lives up to the hype that we all believe he's going to, et cetera. But what I'm really fascinated about with this fit, Greg Popovich is one of the most worldly coaches that we have in the NBA, with the influences that allow him to integrate things that he finds over in Europe. He had Ettore Messina on his staff for a long period of time. Like he has been a lifelong learner of the game of basketball and one of the few NBA head coaches who is always looking across the pond to try to find inspiration. I think that that's only going to serve him well in relating to Victor Wembanyama, in finding ways to use him most successfully. And I think that this, you mentioned with Sohan, a very European game. Like this is going to be a very cultured type of team in a lot of different ways with what they bring to the table. That only benefits Wembanyama, but it's the perfect organization to bring that synergy for him.
I think that's absolutely right.